53, which is the second chapter of Megillas Esther. Let's just recap. The first chapter tells the story of the celebration of what Achashverosh thinks is the failure of Jewish prophecy, that there will be a redemption after 70 years. And he uses it as a means to support the popularity of his being king by showing off his wealth, which means he's not in the pockets of donors, as some kings were, and by supplying everybody with goodies, 6-month bash, which is kind of populism that people appreciate, especially the people in Shushan, the capital, where he treats everyone with not only with great care and great generosity, but with a respect that goes beyond what you would expect from a king, celebrating and providing people with a means to celebrate. Everyone is given what he wants, what his own preferences are. And he, in a state of inebriation, tries to engineer a confrontation with the queen, which will deprive her of her independent authority, she being a descendant of Nebuchadnezzar. And initially his attempt to pull her down fails. She refuses to appear. And that makes it even worse, because now she's made a public statement that she's not subject to him. And his advisor, Nemuchan, gives him a brilliant way to spin her refusal and to engineer her downfall by interpreting her action as leading an uprising of the women against the men. And Achashverosh's response is a way of restoring and maintaining male control, which then gets the whole kingdom, the whole empire on his side, by which we mean, of course, all the men. That's the whole kingdom. The women don't count. And his decree is one which is specifically aimed at supporting the mastery of each man in his house vis-a-vis his wife. The excuse for it is Vashti's refusal, Vashti's rebellion. You paint her rebellion as a stab of feminism in the direction of the independence of all women for all men. Surely that's not what she had in mind. She didn't care about the women in the kingdom. I don't think she cared about the men in the kingdom. She had the royal blood flowing in her veins. She didn't need anybody. That was her position. But you paint it that way, and then you make the decree one which specifically says every man should be king in his own house and rule over his wife, and that way you get people to support it. And the decree is that she is no longer queen and should never come before Achashverosh. The oral tradition says he has her killed. But even without that, with straight verses in the text, it's a brilliant victory for Achashverosh, ridding him of someone who could be a potential competition for authority. That's what happened in chapter 1.
So he didn't kill Vashti?
Well, we have an oral tradition, and the oral tradition gives us information that's not in the text. But maybe I didn't explain this well. There's a point in understanding what the text says by itself, and then there's another point in adding the oral information and getting a fuller picture. There's a reason why the author of the text didn't put that in. They left it oral, because you could understand the story on a certain level just on the basis of what's written. To get a fuller picture, you'd have to add in all the oral material as well. I'm teaching the text. So
where in the text does it, which pasuk are we on where it says this?
where it says what?
The thing about Vashti.
That she's removed from being queen?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. That's verse 19. You're welcome. Okay, now chapter 2 starts. After these things, when the wrath, which means anger, of King Achashverosh subsided, he remembered Vashti. Now, when the text says after these things, we assume that the events are told in order. So, after these things means not just it happened later, but as a result of. It means the events we're going to tell you in chapter 2 depend upon chapter 1. You can't understand what's being told in chapter 2 until you take chapter 1 into account. That isn't obvious. That isn't always the case. And not always, when you go from event to event, does the text, this text or other texts of our tradition, say after these things. So here, and we'll see this immediately. Now, reading it literally, and my suggestion to you is when you read any of our texts, and you read it in English, which should cause you to be suspicious that you're not getting it, or even if you're reading it in Hebrew, the first thing you should do is read it like a 10-year-old who has a dictionary and just reads the words and takes them at face value. Try to read it that way. Sometimes it works. Sometimes it doesn't work. Sometimes it becomes very difficult to understand. That's good. So then when it's difficult to understand, you need some kind of deeper understanding because it doesn't make sense as it's written. So let's try this. After these things, when the wrath, the anger of King Achashverosh subsided, he remembered Vashti and what she had done and what had been decreed against her. After these things, he remembered. Does that mean in between he forgot? Forgot. Gee, I haven't seen Vashti around for weeks. I wonder where she is. Is she in Acapulco running up the credit card? Oh, slipped my mind. Yes, we got rid of her. Probably not, right? That's not a credible way of reading the text. So here, Ramchal says this by implication, but here's an example of it. The word in Hebrew, lizkor, doesn't mean exactly remember. Because if it meant remember, you would get this absurd text. Lizkor in Hebrew can mean to make a present decision on the basis of past facts, without implying any forgetting in between altogether. And that's clearly what it means here. After these things, Achashverosh is now deciding to get a new queen. For some period of time, he didn't have a queen. Now he wants a queen. So taking into account all the things that happened, and as you'll see, the way in which he goes about getting a queen takes into account all the details of what happened before. Not just a whim. So remembered here means he's now acting on those past facts in a practical way. Okay, but as we said, everything he does from advisors. Because he's not of the royal blood, he didn't grow up in the royal house. How do you go about getting a queen? What will be acceptable in the eyes of the population, because he's desperate for popular support? King's pages. Now let's see what they write here in the Hebrew. Probably is, in ancient English, a page was somebody who sent to give a message to somebody. These are his servants. They're his youth, Nare Hamelech Mishar Sav, the people who serve him. There's no reason to write page here. Absolutely not. They said, here's how you ought to do it. Let there be sought for the king beautiful young maidens. And here the word, I don't know what the English reader reads when he hears maiden, but in English it means virgins. And let the king appoint commissioners in all the provinces of his kingdom, that they may gather together every beautiful young maiden to Shushan the capital, to the harem. Now, harem also, harem in English has associations which isn't in the English, in the Hebrew. Beit Hanashim means just a place for women to dwell, a separate place for women to dwell. Harem, I think, in English implies that they're his wives. They're not his wives; they are candidates in training, as you will see. Under the authority of this fellow Hege, he's the one who is responsible for guarding and protecting the women, and their cosmetics should be given to them. Now, cosmetics in those in the Tanakh's usage includes principally perfumes, not just eyeshadow and blush and so forth and so on. And the young woman, girl, who pleases the king should be queen in place of Vashti. This advice pleased the king, and he followed it. Now, I think we can see a connection here between what happened with Vashti and the advice of the advisors. The advisors here also are very clever. We're going to gather together what kind of girls? Beautiful girls. Just beautiful. That's all. Not smart, not accomplished, not talented, not rich, not experienced, just beautiful.
And not queens?
I'm sorry?
And not queens?
Not queens.
Like when you say just beautiful, did you didn't want a queen, or is that?
I'm saying he's going to choose one of them to be queen.
Yeah, right. No, I'm thinking about Vashti because she had like queen blood.
Oh, yes, of course. That's part of the idea that Esther gets into the group here because nobody knows who she is. And the commentators comment on this, whether if they had known that she herself comes from royal lineage, whether that would have disqualified her. What does he want? No competition! No competition! If she's chosen as queen, you know why she's chosen? Because she's beautiful. And beauty is in the eye of the beholder. She pleases me. She pleases me. What needs to happen in order for her to be kicked out? She doesn't please me. She's there only on my whim. That's what the king wants. That's what the advisors understand. This is the absolute guarantee that there'll be no competition whatsoever. If she picks her head up, she's out. So you see him making sure that he's not going to go through what he went through with Vashti. This woman has only one qualification that earns her the position of queen. She pleases the king because she's good looking. Indeed, that's how the challenge to Vashti was made. What did he say? Let her come, because he wants to show off her beauty to the assembled guests. That's his way of putting her down. That's a way of saying, you're only here because you're beautiful. And she said, drop dead. I'm here because I'm beautiful. I'm here because I'm the granddaughter of the emperor. You need me. You're not legitimate without me. That's why it was a challenge. So here, the advisors who understand his mentality very well, they say to him, this time, enforce it. Make it clear in the gathering that that's all you're looking for. Make it clear in the choice that it's only because of the fact that she pleases you, because she's beautiful, and nothing else. Okay, now at this point, the text introduces the main character in the whole story. There was a Jewish man in Shushan, the capital. His name was Mordechai, son of Yair, son of Shimi, son of Kish, a Benjaminite. That means from the tribe of Benjamin. Why is that important? Is it important?
The fact that he's Benjamin?
Yeah, that he's coming from Benjamin. We'll see. We'll see when we come to Haman. And remember that the lineage is traced back specifically to the tribe that he comes from, who have been exiled from Jerusalem along with the exiles, an exile with Yehoiakim, Yehonia, king of Yehuda, whom Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, had exiled. Okay. Now, he reared Hadassah. In other words, she was under his charge. He brought her up. That is Esther. Oh, she has two names, Hadassah and Esther. Having two names is not terribly unique. Yaakov had the other name of Yisrael, right? And he's the third patriarch. Yisro had several names, Moshe's father-in-law. Moshe himself, the oral tradition preserves. This Yisro having several names is in the text. He's described with different names. Moshe had Hebrew names. They just didn't stick. The only name that stuck with him is what the name that Paro gave him. She had two names. That she's introduced here as having two names. So that's important. These two names have to tell us something. He reared Hadassah, that is Esther, his uncle's daughter. So if Esther is his uncle's daughter, Mordechai and Esther are first cousins. In Jewish law, first cousins can marry.
They can or they can't?
I'm sorry, say again?
They can. Okay, yeah. They can marry.
I'm not getting it.
Yes, if they can marry the first cousin.
They can marry, yes, right. Now, why did Mordechai raise her? Since she had neither father nor mother. She was an orphan from an early age, from both her father and mother. So here is first cousin. He's her first cousin, and he raised her. He was older than she, and he raised her. How much older, we don't know. Not in the text, anyway. The girl was finely featured and beautiful, and when her mother and father had died, Mordechai adopted her as his daughter. Now, that's what you have in the English. Mordechai, now the text, first of all, this whole sentence is unnecessary. We know that he's raising her, so we know all of this. But it says, L'kacha Mordechai, he took her. That's a word which is used commonly for marriage. And then he took her, Lebas, as a daughter. I mean, Oshken Shalo, it's not more or less than what we had from before. This is my insulin pump, which is yelling at me because I didn't do something. No, I don't need something. What I need is what I forgot to do at home. I'll manage without it. It's not going. I'm not in danger. Thank you. Now, I just want you to know that in the oral tradition, there is an opinion that he married her. Don't say took her for a daughter, bas. Say took her for a bayis, for a house. And a house is a way of referring to your wife. So we have to understand that the whole story has to include the possibility that he married her. Now, this is background. In other words, the first paragraph told us where the king is holding. He's holding by finding a queen, by scouring the whole kingdom, 127 provinces, for beautiful girls. And now we're told one of the girls in the province is Esther, who is under the care of Mordechai and perhaps married to Mordechai, but secretly. Because he brought her up from a young age. He took her in as an orphan and brought her up. And if they married secretly. It wasn't public knowledge. So it came to pass, verse 8, when the king's bidding and decree were published, publicizing the search for beautiful girls, one of whom will be queen, when many young girls were brought together to Shushan the capital, under the charge of Haggai, that Esther was taken into the palace under the charge of Haggai, the guardian of the women, because she too was beautiful, and it wasn't known that she was married. The girl pleased him. Now, this guy, Haggai, he's described as a saris. A saris means a person who's castrated. It's good to have a castrated man in charge of the women, isn't it? Right? Otherwise, being in charge of the women in Persia could give a man ideas, right? But here's a guy who can't do anything. So, it's a phrase that's used over and over again. I have people around who don't have that problem vis-a-vis the rest of the kingdom. The girl pleased him. And he's bringing in these beautiful girls from all over, from 127 provinces, and you'll see we're talking about hundreds and hundreds of girls. She somehow pleased him. Now, in Hebrew, Batisa chesed lefanav. Okay. She was good in his eyes, and she brought out kindness in him. And because of that, one of the things they did is, you'll see, they prepared the girl for the encounter with the king by beautifying her, some of which was anointing her body with oils and perfumes for a whole year. And he, when we say in Hebrew, he was makbid. He told the people who are in charge of this process of beautifying the girls, pay attention to this one. Pay attention to this one. I want you to give her special attention. Cosmetics and the allowance of delicacies. Now, delicacies sounds to you like food, but monos can be food, or it can be any items that are necessary for her well-being. And he gave her 7 young girls as her servants from the house, from the king's possessions. And he, Haggai, he made her distinguished, different from all the other girls and all the other that were under his care. He treated her specially. Now, there's no indication whatsoever here that she did anything to provoke this. She's one of hundreds, and she was good in his eyes, and she called out kindness in him by just being there. And he transferred her and her maidens to the best quarters in the harem. What were the Beis Noshin, the place where the women were placed. Esther had not told her of her people or kindred, for Mordechai had instructed her not to tell. Now, some of the commentators say what we mentioned before, that she comes from royal family, royal lineage. Mordechai was under the impression that if her royal lineage will be known, that will be a reason that he should choose her, because he's choosing her to be king, and she comes from royal lineage. If that's the case, then Mordechai misunderstands Achashverosh, which could happen. From our point of view, it certainly could happen. He thinks that... What's going on here? Is my phone ringing? Oh. I see. Somebody's been trying to call me. 1 second. Okay. I'll call him back later. Mordechai thinks that if it's known that she comes from royal lineage, that would influence the king to pick her, because someone, like you said before, like someone with a queen's with a king's lineage would be appropriate for him. Would enhance his kingdom. The truth is the exact opposite. By keeping her quiet, that makes it more likely she'll be chosen. And here is a feature of Jewish thought that you have over and over again. That you have a plan, and you have a way to ensure the plan or to push the plan forward. And unbeknownst to you, you are pushing forward Hakadosh Baruch Hu's plan, which is not your plan at all. You think you're going to avoid what Hakadosh Baruch Hu wants to be the outcome, and you're doing the exact opposite. Hakadosh Baruch Hu wants her to be chosen. You think you're helping prevent her from being chosen, and no, you're actually making more likely that she'll be chosen, because had Achashverosh known that she had royal lineage, he wouldn't have chosen her at all. He doesn't want a repeat of the Vashti competition. This is a very common, and you'll see that it happens to Haman as well.
Wait, Mordechai does want Esther chosen, or doesn't?
No, he certainly does not.
So why didn't Mordechai tell Esther to say that she has royal lineage?
Because he thinks that her having royal lineage will influence Achashverosh to choose her.
Oh, because he misunderstands Achashverosh's criteria.
That's right. That's right. Every day, Mordechai used to walk about in front of the court, of the courtyard. I don't know, they call it a court. It's not a court. It's a chatzer. Chatzer is a courtyard of the Beis Hanashim, the place where the women were kept, in order to find out about Esther's well-being and what would become of her. Not clear from the text how he would find out. There was communication from some of the girls that he gave her, that she was given, the servants she was given, so they could communicate with one another, but they couldn't stray too far, so he came there to find out. And by the way, don't pay attention to the paragraphs in the English. Just look at the Hebrew. The Hebrew text in the Art Scroll library reflects the actual divisions of the Hebrew text. So that's a place to look. And as you see, this is all one block of text, all the way down to 3/4 of the way down the page.
Wait, Rabbi, what's Mordechai's intention at this point? He simply doesn't want Esther to be selected? That's where he stands mentally with respect to the progression of events here?
For sure he doesn't want her to be selected.
But that's it. Like, as far as we know, that's Mordecai's state of mind.
I mean, he also is concerned for her welfare during the whole process. Mm-hmm. She is, after all, keeping Shabbos, and she's not eating any food, and she's strict, and she's doing what she's doing. Okay. And the Heged she looks beautiful and she's charming. If she's chosen, like any one of the ones that he's chosen, then he's done his job and it's been a success, and he'll be thought of well. That's what he has in mind. Now here's the procedure: when each girl's turn arrived to come to King Achashverosh, after having been treated according to the manner prescribed for women for 12 months, there was a 12-month process that these women were put through, for so was the prescribed length of their anointing. That means treating their body with oils. 6 months with oil of myrrh, 6 months with perfumes, feminine cosmetics. Thus the girl came to the king. She was given whatever she requested to accompany her from the Beis Hanashim, the women's residence, to the palace. Any clothes, any particular perfumes that you want, any jewelry, whatever you want. This is your one shot at becoming queen. We have a lot of resources here. Name your, your implements. In the evening she would come, and the next morning she would return to the second place of where the women were kept, in the custody of Shashgaz, because now she's had relations with the king. Now she functions as one of the harem of wives in the way that we normally understand that. This has a different person who's in charge, Shashgaz, not Hege. It's in a different place. And of course, once she's had relations with the king, she can do nothing else. She's just available to be there whenever the king wants her, as the king's servant, guardian of the concubines. She would never again go to the king unless the king desired her, and she was summoned by name. She becomes on the roster of the king's wives. So that was the procedure. Now, when the turn came for Esther, daughter of Avichail, uncle of Mordechai, who had adopted her as her own daughter. Now, according to the one who says that this is a subtle reference to the being married, it's very logical that it should be put in here. Reader, pay attention, she's married! So, this is a gigantic tragedy. She's married and she's going to the king to have relations with somebody else. That wasn't the plan of the gathering of the girls. The plan was that they should all be virgins, unmarried. In other words, the king wasn't looking to interfere with marriages. He wasn't looking to brutally take other men's women. No, he was looking for a woman who's unmarried and unexperienced, and he'll choose her for himself. Not trying to do something that would cause an uprising. Remember, he's desperately afraid of his popularity. So he's certainly not going to take married women. Yeah.
I'm trying to understand. It doesn't seem sustainable. The king's trying to look for a new queen, and trying to look for the most beautiful woman in the land. Now he's trying to go out of his way to make them even more beautiful. It's not, whatever the process that they're being put in for a whole year is not sustainable. It's not going to be like that forever.
Why not? She's queen. She can have whatever she wants. All the oils and all the perfumes and all the cosmetics and everything else, she can have them for the rest of her life.
So she's expected, that 12-month thing is to get her to the level of how she's supposed to be as queen forever.
I would imagine so. I mean, he's choosing her only because she's beautiful. She's given 12 months to make herself as beautiful as possible. She wants to stay there. He better stay beautiful. I would imagine that's correct.
And what was the thing that made King Ahasuerus be like, pay attention to this specific one? Because he had to pay attention to what specific? To Esther.
Well, we haven't gotten there yet. We're coming to that. We'll see. This wasn't the custom. We're talking now about the man who's in charge of guarding these women. Hege. His name is Hege. He's the one who was impressed by her and made her different and made sure that the ones who provide the cosmetics gave her special attention.
And they didn't know that she was Jewish.
Right.
The name Mordechai doesn't sound Jewish.
They didn't know she was related to Mordechai.
It's a Persian name, Mordechai.
And her name is Esther, which is also not Jewish.
Who knows what Persian name she gave them?
Good point. Okay.
She was definitely taking every measure to hide her identity. So, verse 15. When the turn came for Esther, daughter of Avichail, who had adopted her as her own daughter, and if that's if that's a subtle reference to the fact that they were married, then it comes in here. This sefer, to a great extent, is melodramatic. It doesn't leave much to your imagination. You don't have to figure things out. It makes them prominent and will emphasize them. So, to come to the king, she requested nothing beyond what Hege, or Hegai now they call him, the king's servant, guardian of the women, had advised. She plays an entirely passive role. And all the verbs that apply to here are nifal. They're things that happen to her, not things that she does. Even linguistically, she plays an entirely passive role. It's happening to her. Esther would captivate. There's no word in Hebrew for captivate. Let's see what the Hebrew writes. I don't remember it that well. Tesvav. Esther. Big show. Noses chen. Now, Chen is a kind of charm. It's where you'll look at someone and be attracted to the person. If somebody asks you, what in the person is attracting you? The answer is, I have no clue. I have no clue. I just find the person attractive. It's something you can't define. That's the idea of Chen. In the eyes of all who see her. That's why in English the word charm is not bad. It too, if you say, why do you like that person? Why do you like to associate with that person? I don't know, I just find the person charming. That could disappear in a second. If it was the person's courage, or the person's brilliance, or the person's kindness, that has a certain stability. Unless the person's characteristics and behavior change, that has a certain stability. But if it's I don't know what that captivates me, that could change instantly. Because there's nothing defining what it is. So again, if that's the basis of the choice, it has maximum insecurity. I used to find you charming, and now I don't. Bye. Right? Which is what he wants. He wants maximum insecurity. Esther was taken to King Ahasuerus into his palace. 10th month was one of the Teves, in the 7th year of his reign. Now let's figure this out, boys and girls. The 7th year of his reign, and the original event took place in the 3rd year of his reign, that's 4 years later. How much time went by between the party in which Vashti was deposed and the time in which he started searching for a queen? We don't know. The normal thought is some months. So you have 4 years, or maybe a little more, depending on what the months were. 4 years, one girl a night. That's over 1,000 girls. But what does he care? He's rich. He can sustain all of them. They go into the harem, right? And this went on for almost something like 4 years. Then it's Esther's turn. The king loved Esther more than all the women, which means that he wasn't disgusted with all of them. Some of them attracted his fancy. Some of them were pleasant. Some of them he liked, but not enough. Esther was superior to all the others, and she won more of his grace and favor. Let's see, check the Hebrew, what's going on here. Tisachain, that's charm, and kindness before him, more than all of the virgins. So now the careful reader has to say, wait a minute. In this verse, we have reference to virgins, and before that, to women. Why are there two references? And why are there two different words being used? And the answer is that at a certain point, talking about 1,000 females, right? At a certain point, they widened the scope. Not just virgins. Now, nowhere do we have any indication that he interfered with people's marriages, but you could have widows. You could have divorcees. You could have, It broadened out, and the competition was a bigger range and more difficult competition. And still, Esther was like incomparable. And the king put the crown of the queen on her head and made her queen in place of Vashti. Now, here too, Vashti was there, Vashti got pushed out, and now Esther is queen. What do you gain by saying in place of Vashti? It means you have to have what Vashti was in mind, and the kind of relationship that you have with Vashti in mind. And you have to understand that she's being put in place of that. in place of that, given everything that I've told you, doesn't mean to do what she did, to fill her shoes, but on the contrary, to be very different from her. Instead of the Vashti competition, I have the new queen who will be totally subservient, totally dependent, and totally insecure. It's fulfilling what the king wants. Okay, now, there was a celebration, a banquet. Who makes the banquet? Look, the king made a great banquet for his officers and servants, Esther's banquet. Remember what happened when he made his party? Vashti made her own banquet. In the king's palace, she made the banquet. Not Esther. She does nothing. Sorry. She does nothing. The king makes a banquet for her. Fine. She has no independence, no authority, no independent action. She's just a bauble. She's a something to dangle in front of, to dangle and show her beauty. Of course, she's not going to do it the way he wanted Vashti to do it either, but still. And he proclaimed an amnesty for the provinces, meaning he forgave debts for the provinces and gave gifts worthy of the king. Why is he doing this? Why is he showing such largesse? So you say he did it to cover popular favor, because we said he was afraid of his popularity. Yes, that's part of his motivation. But that's only part of his motivation. And the proof of it is the next words, which again is not a separate paragraph in the Hebrew. And when the maidens were gathered together the second time. What? Maidens were gathered together the second time? Why? For what purpose? He's found Esther. She's charmed him, and he calls out. She calls out kindness in him. Why did they gather together a second time? And Mordecai sat at the king's gate. Esther still told nothing of her kindred or her people, as Mordecai had instructed her. For Esther continued to obey Mordecai, just as when she was raised by him. That's the end of the paragraph in Hebrew. What's the connection? Well, how do the ideas develop here? The king marries her, he makes a banquet, he gives gifts, and amnesty, he forgives debts, and gathers virgins again into the capital. And Mordecai sitting at the gate, and Esther doesn't tell what her background is, who her identity is. It's all one story. The king wants to know who she is. He wants to know who she is. She says not a word. He asks his advisors, his shabak, his secret police. Nobody knows who she is. He's going to have her as queen because he can't. He's infatuated. He's gripped, but it bothers him. Who is she? So here's his plan. His plan is, I'm going to find out because I'm going to trigger the people who know to talk. I'm going to make this a cause célèbre. The whole kingdom, 127 provinces, are going to be talking about it. I'm forgiving debts. I'm giving out gifts throughout the kingdom. Everybody's going to be, someone will spill the beans. Someone will say, oh, look at that. That's that girl from over there. She's to quit. Not a word. Not a word. So then he says, okay, I'm going to frighten her. We gathered virgins the first time. She's a king. She's a queen, right? She's going to see a new gathering of virgins into the capital, and she's going to think, well, I'm not doing what he wants. He wants me to tell him who I am, and he's not doing what he wants. So he's thinking of getting a new queen. He's trying to frighten her. Nothing else. Nothing else. Now, how do I know this? I know this because later on, when it comes to the banquets, she says to the king, before the second banquet, I want you and Haman to come to the second banquet, and tomorrow at the banquet, I will do the king's bidding. I will do what the king wants. Really? What does she do that the king wants? What is it that the king wants that she hasn't been doing? The next day, she identifies herself. She says who she is. So that's how I know that this is what's going on over here. Because he wants it, and he's been influencing it, trying to do it. He has a plan and giving gifts and so on and so on, and bringing the new virgins in to try and frighten her. He really wants this. And she says, no. And then she says, okay, finally I'm going to do it. Yeah.
No, you
Oh, sorry. Yeah. So you can see that the text is connected, and what we'll see that later, you'll see that's the key to understanding what's going on here. And she's hiding her identity because Mordechai said so. That's the way. That's what. According to these commentators, Mordechai is sort of shooting himself in the foot and doesn't know it, because if he would reveal her identity, then could be that would end it, because he does, as we said, the king doesn't want to be faced with competition and independent authority. Okay, that's almost to the end of chapter 2. We'll pick it up again tomorrow in session.